And welcome back as we look into another one of our tools that we have seen before, but we're going to actually apply it. Now, that tool, of course, today is going to be the paintbrush tool. Now, we have seen how the paintbrush tool and the pencil tool differ, and just as a quick recap, I'm just going to show you those again, just so we can get a quick side-by-side. So with our pencil tool, if you recall, I'm just going to make this just a little bit bigger because right now we're set to 1 pixel. So let's just make that just a little bit bigger so we can see that just a little more clearly. With the pencil tool, when I draw with that, regardless of whatever color I'm using, you can see that the colors, of course, are very hard. The brush edge is what's considered a hard tool. So wherever that pixels are drawn for, it's going to place that color. So even if I change that pixel color, it's simply overwriting it into whatever color it is. Comparison, if I look at this with the brush tool, or what we like to also sometimes call as the paintbrush, I increase that up a little bit here. And I paint with that. Let's go back to yellow here for a second. And paint with that one. If you recall, we have more of this feathered gradient style painting. And if I do the same thing, I paint over with red, of course here you can see we have some slightly different effects going on. All right, and that's because, again, this is more of a soft edge tool versus over here with the pencil, it's very much more of a hard edge tool. So these, of course, are two totally different tools. Now, it doesn't mean that the brush tool does not have its uses. In fact, there are different modes, for example, within the brush tool that we can look at. So let's just clear this out here to kind of get us started. So let's just go ahead and fill this here. We're going to reset this back to white. All right, now we have a fresh canvas. And up here, of course, we have our pixel size. And this is the first thing I'm going to look at here to get started. So we are starting off with 3 pixels in this example, just so we can see it a little bit clearer. And you can see in here we have the different brush settings. And of course, these can pay a lot more effect when you're using things like, let's say, a stylus versus a mouse, because with the stylus, you can apply different pressures, allowing you to indicate the hardness of how much you want that color to be applied. But since we have a mouse right now and not a stylus, that's something that we're not going to worry about. Now, there are, of course, different brush styles available here within Photoshop that you can look at. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and stay up here with the hard round style. Now, doesn't mean that's the only style available to us, but this is the one we're going to start with for now. And again, there's also other things we should look at. Opacity is a big thing here too. So right now my opacity is set to 100%. If I were to paint with this one, let's keep it right here at our nice magenta. I'm going to do that same brush stroke, but let's just take it down to close to 50% here. Same brush stroke, and you can see, even though it is the same brush stroke with the same level of hardness, we have 50% opacity applied to this brush stroke simply because we changed that toggle. And what does that mean? Well, that means that this is only letting through 50% of that color. Now, if you were using things like a stylus and stuff like that, you can really tap into some of these other tools, such as being able to apply like an angle, for example. There's also different modes you can use to apply different ways this brush tool can come through. And this is where the brush tool really can shine versus that of the pencil tool. So, for example, if I were to use the darken and I were to darken this, you can see it very quickly and easily allows me to darken an area. But if I were to change this to, let's say, a lighten, and I apply the same thing, you can see that it doesn't work in the same manner as we had before. In fact, we don't see it, in fact, painting really at all with that same color. Now, most of the time, we're going to probably leave it on normal, which is what we're going to use for today's example. But just wanted to show you a quick recap of some of the different features that we have with our brush tool. So, let's actually now use this to create some pixel art. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and fill this again. But this time, instead of doing white, let's do a black background. All right, so now I have a black background in here, and I'm going to go ahead and decrease my brush size. I'm going to go back down to 1, and let's just reset our colors here to black and white. And I'm going to switch those so I have a white brush, and let's use this to go ahead and create something like, let's say, fire. Because let's say we want to create something like an icon for a video game, and we're in a 32 by 32 canvas. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and create just a basic shape for fire right now. And we can, of course, come and touch this up later. All right, there's my basic shape. Now, I'm going to go ahead and grab the bucket tool real quick. Let's just fill that in with white. And now we have a shape for us to kind of go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and let's use some yellow. So I'm going to start first with this light yellow to kind of get started here. And now the advantage of using something like the brush tool, it allows me to kind of come in here pretty easily and add different patterns and flows without having to accommodate for all the different textures that I would have to use if I was using a brush tool. So you can see I can come in here, I can add these different textures in here pretty easily. And now if I have a color I don't have, well, I can easily find that through a different palette. But of course, if you had your palette set up in a way where you could easily access that, you could do that. Of course, I could always just come down here, change that. Like, I want more of an orange. So I'm going to use that now to kind of get some more orange within my flame. And so on and so forth. I'm going to pause the video and come back. I'm going to have here a nice flame that you can go ahead and try to create your own version of. And there we go. I've created, of course, a nice flame here. And one of the things that I found when I was working on this technique to make this image here, yours might look a little different than mine, that's okay. But one of the techniques is that I increased that brush size to 3 pixels, simply because it gave me a little more flexibility with some of the things I was doing. So for example, when I was at 1 pixel here, it pretty much was a very small area that would do some recoloring for. However, if I were to, let's say, use that same amount here, but let's go to 3 pixels just to see this comparison. And you can see how much more area I can affect here with 1 versus 3. And so that allowed me to quickly recolorize this here. Now you can see there's a lot of different tonality and stuff within this image. And I only use a few basic colors. There's the yellow that I have in here, the white that we started with. I used a little bit of orange, some red, and of course, just a little bit of a dark red. And then I added this kind of this bluish shade down here just to give some base to the fire. But you can see it's nothing that is a huge range of colors. But with the brush tool, I was able to add all this variation. If I had done this with the pencil tool, it would have taken me far longer to add all this different variation in here. So that's going to wrap up today's lesson with using the brush tool. I want you to go ahead and be able to try and make your own fire. And let's see if we can extend that out to other things that we could make, such as, let's say, if we wanted to make something for ice or grass, or maybe you have something, let's say, like electricity. There's a whole bunch of different options of things that we have available to us now that we have our knowledge of how the pencil tool works. But in addition to that, we can also use the brush tool to add a lot more flavor and tonality to our images.